How to use statistics in a research proposal. Whenever there is a topic that is of personal interest to us that we're intrinsically interested in, we often have to convince other people of the importance of investigating this topic and taking an interest in it. And statistics are one of the best ways to do that, but it is important to be careful how we use them and to use them strategically. American author and satirist Mark Twain once said that there are three kinds of lies, damned lies, and statistics. So, keeping that in mind when our readers are going through stats, they're probably going to be hypercritical of them. So, we need to make sure that we use them in a manner that is going to be compelling and accurate. So, how can we use stats to engage our reader? Well, stats can serve three purposes. First, they can show the prevalence of an issue. Second, they can show the relevance of the issue to the reader. And third, they can show the urgency of addressing the issue. We could start by saying that 55% of Americans die of heart disease, and this shows the prevalence. Now, in addition, the readers could be directly impacted by that number, and then that also shows the relevance. And finally, if there is immediate lifestyle changes needed, then that shows also the urgency. Now, when we're using stats, it might be one or any combination of these three factors, but it's ideal to try to hit up all three to make it as compelling as possible for your reader. How can we effectively use stats? Well, there's two general frameworks in which they're used, so let's take a look at each of them. First, we have percentages, then we have totals. Let's start with the percentages. If somebody were writing an article about cancer, they might note that 40% of Canadians will be diagnosed with cancer at some point in their lives. In this way, the reader will see the prevalence of the issue and how it is relevant to them as well. However, if we were to say that nearly 0.9% of people who contracted COVID died due to complications related to the virus, this percentage is so small it's not nearly as compelling. The reader might just give it a shrug and say, meh, that seems pretty small. And in fact, we saw how callous people were during COVID, and there was any number of people who saw this number as insignificant. So in this context, we might want to instead try to focus on totals. We could alternately say that over 70 billion people would have died of COVID-19 had everybody on the planet contracted the virus. Now, when the reader sees that total of 70 billion, it is a jaw-dropping number. And we can see here how the total, even if it's technically a little bit less than the percentage, can be far more compelling. Now, we might be looking at the homeless situation in Windsor, where neither the percentage nor the total is very compelling. There are 700 homeless families in Windsor. 700 is a relatively low total, and although this is a tragically high number within the context of Windsor, a lot of people aren't going to find that number compelling. So we're going to pass on that. We could instead go with 0.03% of Windsor residents are homeless, but this is only a fraction of a percent, so this is even less compelling than the total. So what can we do instead? We could instead focus on the growth of the population. Windsor's homeless population has increased by 400% in 10 years. This is far more effective because that percentage shows the dramatic increase in the population. And whether being used as a hook or as a rationalization for the justification of your research, this is going to be far more compelling. Likewise, we could focus on percentages within our target population instead of the general population. Here we have over 90% of Windsor's homeless population is not getting proper medical support. This is far more compelling than that 0.03% that we mentioned earlier because the number is more significant and we see how prevalent the impact is within the target population. Within my research, I'm going to be looking at the ways in which social work interventions can be appropriated and adopted in education in order to inform and create pedagogies that can, in turn, support international students. And to this end, I plan on using statistics for two strategies. First, I'm going to outline the size of the population to demonstrate prevalence. And second, I'm going to focus on the economic impact to make it relevant to the reader. As part of my hook, I'll note that Canada is host to over 1 million international students, and that number, of course, comes from the Canadian Bureau for International Education 2024. I will put that reference in the description so you can check that out if you like. Now, this number is going to show the prevalence of the issue, but I also want to make it relevant to the reader. When justifying the research, I'll be sure to note that international students help generate over 360,000 jobs in Canada, which leads to over 7 billion in tax revenue, over 37 billion in economic activities, and 30 billion in GDP. And that is, of course, from the Government of Canada 2024, which will also be referenced in the comments section. So once the reader sees that this is having a direct impact, it becomes easier for them to see how it's relevant and beneficial to them. A lot of people might have xenophobic views and see international students as more of a problem. So when they see the benefits of that, they're going to be intrinsically motivated to take an interest because the reality is not everybody is altruistic and recognizes the inherent value of these things. The next question is, where do we get the stats? Because we don't want to understand simply how to use them, but we want to get effective ones and reliable ones. So let's take a look at that. Smaller peer-reviewed studies have less generalizable data. Though they may be reliable, they're often specific to a region or even school. Therefore, we want to get stats that could be more generalizable to the broader population. Government and national organizations offer what's called gray data, which is to say it's not peer reviewed, but it is reliable. And that can be far more compelling because you can get national statistics and large, more generalizable numbers that grab the reader's attention and are more accurate. However, you always want to carefully vet the information and the stats that you're getting to ensure that it is reliable. And we can do that using something called the CRAP test. So, what is the CRAP test? Well, CRAP is an acronym. The C stands for currency because we want our information and our data to be current. If we get data regarding online education from 2018, it's probably not going to be terribly relevant to our contemporary education scene because online education has been completely transformed since COVID. We also want to make sure that the data we're getting is relevant, that's self-evident, and likewise that it is accurate. It is also important to make sure that the source we're going to is an authority. And in the case of gray data, when we're looking at government and organizational websites, that's usually clear as well. And we also want to understand the purpose. Some organizations might have a certain agenda or mission statement that creates a conflict of interest or bias, and we want to be aware of that as well before we choose to use their information. Hopefully this little video gave you some insights that you can use to enhance your research. If you have any comments or questions, leave them below. And until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.